work for everyone? Well, as youth studies show, young people bring a broad diversity of milieux, lifestyles, gender differences, not to forget gender differences. I think you can read from youth studies are extremely important to be observed in your world. And schools have to take this as resources. Supporting the internationalization of schools, youth studies very clearly tell us that young people like international contacts. They are not afraid of globalization. The older generation is much more hesitating to go into this direction. Young people are not. And they are doing this in spite of the fact that they can be considered to be a lost generation because of their labor market problems. So I think this is very impressive. We have a young generation which nevertheless, in spite of all the objective problems and difficulties they are facing, is relatively optimistic, is self-conscious. Most of them are sure that they will make it, but they need our help. And I think if we have a closer look into all these studies and if we collect all the experience that is in this room here, we will make it. Thank you very much.
Professor Hollermann, thank you very much. I think the application of youth studies for education can be a very interesting perspective on how we move forward within Comenius and the education system. I have to say, looking at these 5 issues of qualifications, gender gaps, social attachment, regeneration and participation, I'm very happy to be the father of 2 daughters as opposed to 2 sons, so that seems to be We now have 6 or 7 minutes before the coffee break, and I'm very happy to announce that all 3 of our speakers are available to stay and take any questions or some comments. We've heard lots of challenging ideas this morning from all 3 speakers, and I would invite our collaborators from Teamwork who will be going around with, can you stick up your hands? So there we go, with microphones. If you have a comment or a question that you would like to make in the 5 minutes that remain, please do so. I hope I'm a lot of chatter in the room as some of the points were being made, so if you'd like to share some of those comments with us or any questions. Put it this way, you're not getting coffee earlier.
You can have your own.
Good morning.
If you could stand up, great.
I'm Renos Georgiou from Cyprus. I have an certain question about Erasmus for All. As we have heard, Erasmus for All will cover the ages from nursery until 30 years old. So I know that from Youth in Action, for the current time is different than LLP programs. The youth who participated in these programs are not currently involved in formal education. Maybe they are members of any association or any other club. But I'm afraid that under the Erasmus for All, we are going to exclude these young people who are not under education, under formal education, and they are just under non-formal education. So what is going to happen with this?
Thank you very much. Just to say, we will be having a full session tomorrow morning on the Erasmus for All proposals, but maybe one of our 2 speakers from the Commission would like to answer that.
Yeah, I will try. The main goal of Erasmus for All is not to exclude anything at all of the program. The main goal is to try to pick up what can we do best and what are the most important areas in the different domains in the traditional education area, in youth domain, and try to develop, reinforce these initiatives. Of course, we can't support everything. The amount of budget that we are dedicating and we expect to be dedicating to the Erasmus for All environment will be much more than we have today, because we collectively have succeeded to put the education and the youth on top of the agenda for the European Union. So we succeed collectively to convince our policymakers to increase the global budget dedicated to Erasmus for All to a sort of 70% more than the present program. So we have a lot of money more. Nevertheless, this will be a drop on the sea. So we can't continue to develop all the things that have been developed until now. We try to concentrate our effort on the more critical aspects that we have done, the more successful areas in which we have acted until now. Okay, you are raising an issue which is how can we continue to support young people, and probably those who are not covered on the youth, the traditional youth, that are not covered yet by the employment area, that are in between. I think there is nothing that will impede in the next generation to address this issue. Because if we want to be and to continue to be on top of the agenda, we need to support Europe, and in particular the youth population, to reinforce their capabilities, to reinforce their competence in order to increase their employability. So I don't see that we can exclude this population, and what I may see is that we need to have a more integrated approach, and this is the main idea that we have in creating this Erasmus for All. So, of course, if we do not have, as we have today, different programs or different sub-programs, we have a comprehensive and holistic and a very integrated approach. And I don't see that today we are excluding this population, because it's a very important population that will not be still integrated in the education area. It's not already on the labor market. Is the population in between, let's say, if I well understood, between 16, 17, 24, that are around that have. We need to support this population under different and being very innovative, very creative, in order to allow them, probably using also these vocational instruments that we have, training instruments that we have, and also here is a very important that we can support them in having vocational education and training development, but we also need to have participation from the business in order to facilitate some more skilled, more practical approach. I don't believe that we can exclude, and this is not our aim.
Very good. Just to repeat again, there will be a consultation tomorrow before the lunch break on Erasmus for All, and so please be thinking about this and store up your questions to be ready for that session. Any final comments or observations or questions from... Yes, please? Oh, and then the lady at the front, and then...
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Andreas Brett from Germany, MERS, and I have a comment on Professor Horemann's presentation and the question too. First of all, my comment we can identify a lot with what you told us about the results of youth studies in Germany, and we have already done several projects with our school concerning the topics that you presented to us. But the point of view that you have in your presentation, of course, is the point of view of the students. And my question now is, don't you think that there is a big challenge in between the point of view of the economical part of society and of the students? Because I would like to give an example. If you see what happens in Germany with the G8 A-level exam, that the time is reduced from 9 years to 8. That means there's less time for all the jobs to do. So what is your comment on this? Thank you.
And before you answer that, could you just take the final question? I think the lady in front. Good microphone. Oh, thank you.
Thank you. My name is Daniela Kami. I'm from Austria. I just want to ask Professor Harriman about his youth study, because I think here we are very open-minded, very engaged people, and are interested in common projects. But there is also to see some undemocratic attitudes. Also and I would like to know what you find out in your youth studies, because I think we also have to think about people who are not open-minded. And it's not only to participate and to be initiative in politics, but it's also about the quality of participation. And I think it's very important to have critical thinking and democratic attitude and not undemocratic attitude. So I would be interested in what you have find out in your youth studies. That is one point. And the second point I wanted to make about the gender gap you said about boys. And I think maybe it's also a problem in schools that most of the time there are women, more and more women teachers and not men in school. So what did you find out about that? Thank you.
Well, this is a very disputed topic. It happens that since 1980, not only the educational achievements of female students are going up and up and up, but exactly in 1980, in most European countries, during this year, we did have more female professionals in preschool and school areas than male. And of course, there can be a correlation between these two developments, especially because, as I have mentioned, we do have hints that the problems of boys to fulfill this task of educational and occupational qualification have a relation to their insecure gender role. So research still is going on, but it's much disputed whether there is a direct correlation between the femininization of the educational profession and the weak performance of boys. I personally think there is a complicated, not direct, obviously not direct, but a complicated correlation, because young boys do not have the social model of men around them, and this is not good for education. So we should not wait until this really has been verified and is empirically evident. But if we start now to increase the amount of male professionals or male tutors or whatsoever in school and preschool, we will be on the right side, and I think it's very important. The second question of yours, yes, it's very important to have in mind that, well, about 10 to 20% of all young people are not active in participating in policy. They do not have the competences to play the democratic game. They are once they are in a low educational area, not only critics of democracy, but they are against democracy. So there is a growing group of, by the way, mainly boys, without any future, low performance, more and more turning to undemocratic position, to intolerant attitudes, to very risky value orientations. And yes, I agree, this is a big challenge. And we will meet these young people, these young boys, mainly young men, mainly in schools where you collect many of them. So, well, this has to be put on our list. And the first question, yes, I think the educational challenge of schools is to prepare young people for society and for the labor market. This is true. But if the labor market doesn't work, it is not the responsibility of schools to cope with this problem. So if the labor market doesn't work, and if we do have this high percentage of unemployment, we have to be aware that the main idea of schools is to make young people strong, to give them self-confidence, to tell them how to manage their life. Schools are not in the position to change the labor market, but schools are in the position to change the personality of young people. And this is what they have to do. And so I would encourage all schools to focus on the aim that your students leave the school with the feeling, well, I'm strong, I'm an autonomous personality, I know what my competences are, I know my weaknesses, I know my strengths. This is what I have learned in school. I have learned something for my present life. Whether this really holds for my future life, well, this is not the responsibility of school. So I would say this discussion really is of importance in the present situation, and I think we have to face this.
Very quickly, with the risk that we are eating people's coffee break.
Well, I do not resist to intervene here, probably to have some food for discussion during your today. Of course, schools cannot change labor market, but if we assist today to a mismatch between the offer and the demand, schools also need to do something. Cooperating with business market, to understand what are the real requests of today, what are the competencies, what are the skills that are requested to the young people that are entering at a certain moment in the game. So, not only to say, okay, schools have nothing to do, schools have a role to play in here, and should be attentive to the development of the labour market requests and needs. Go.
Thank you very much. Well, we now have a coffee break. If I could ask you to be back by 1:45, so by 11:45, that would be greatly appreciated. But before we all leave, may I ask you to give a round of applause. Currently conducting a feasibility study on long-term mobility of teachers and other school education staff. ECROIS UK, represented by Neil MacDonald, is doing an online survey to gather opinions of teachers, schools and experts. He is downstairs in the reception area. Neil, where exactly are you?
Well, what I'm going to do is I have some...
Is it possible just to quickly give Neil a thank you?
Hello? Yeah. What I've done is I've brought along some little leaflets that explain why we're doing the survey, and it's got a link on there that allows you to go to the website and fill that in. So what I'll do is I'll be hanging around downstairs, but I'll also leave some of these strategic positions. They're in 6 languages as well, so hopefully you can find one to your taste. I won't say any more about the survey, but I think it will come up. The whole idea of the longer term mobility is something that will come up, I think, later. And also in the workshop, and I'll be in the workshop on the theme of internationalisation. So, but if anybody has anything that they want to tell me about, any thoughts on longer term mobility for teachers and other education professionals, just come in and have a word with me.
Thank you. And if I could ask all of you to make an effort to make sure you get one of those leaflets and fill in the questionnaire, that would be wonderful. Thank you all very much. May I ask Corinne Rigaud to stand up? Corinne, hello. You'll be manning the Comenius stand downstairs in the reception area. Please go to the stand. Corinne is there. Any information that you require on Comenius, I think you're the person they need to talk to.
Yes, I'm part of a team.
Okay.
But and I'm not the
only one representative of the Comenius program, of course, but I will be understand because I agreed with Thomas that I can manage it without having a coffee break, without having lunch, etc. No, I'm joking. Welcome, Thomas.
So for those of you with a humanitarian spirit, when you're getting your coffee, please take 2 cups and walk over when you've got your The final thing is that we have a wall. And the wall is a big white board and it has lots of very colourful post-it notes on it. And all these post-it notes are blank and they need to be filled in. So if any of you have any comments or messages you would like to give to Comenius or to the other participants, please locate the wall, which is near those very slow coffee machines, so you have plenty of time as you're standing in the queue. Write something on one of the post-it notes, stick it on the wall. Very good. Well, that gives me the great pleasure to invite Paul Collard, Chief Executive of Creativity, Culture and Education in the UK, to address us for this last morning session. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed to Comenius for inviting me to speak to you all today. And thank you very much to Klaus for a really fantastic presentation to get us started. I was busy with my laptop actually changing my presentation as he was talking to try and bring them a bit together. One aspect of his presentation that I really liked was this extended notion of childhood, adolescence, young adulthood going on. And it reminds me that when I first went to school, the very first time, my parents were living in Copenhagen in Denmark. And the build-up was very exciting, going out buying the school uniform, buying the school bag, buying the lunchbox. On the morning I got up, happy, went to school, came home. My mother said, "How was that?" I said, "It's fantastic." Next morning she came to wake me up. And I said, "Why are you waking me up?" And she said, "It's school." I said, "What? Again?" I needed the presentation to warn me. And actually now, as I'm not that far off 60, I kind of feel I'm just getting to the end of primary education. Looking forward to secondary education. A quick word about CCE, Creativity, Cultural Education. It was set up in the UK originally to run a very big program called Creative Partnerships. It started in 2002. In the last academic year, we worked in 2,500 schools in England. Unfortunately, the present government has decided not to continue with the programme, but it's generated a lot of interest internationally, and we're now delivering programmes in Lithuania and Germany, smaller ones in Hamburg and Norway. We're advisors to the governments of Amsterdam and Western Australia on creative and cultural learning. We've just done a big teacher exchange with Korea. We've run a big EU cultural funded programme called Artists in Creative Education, and we're working with the OECD on how you measure progression in creativity in the classroom. What we basically do is put creative practitioners, artists and other creative people into schools to work with teachers. And that's the heart of our programme and our process. And I'm going to explain a bit today, one, why we do it, and what impact it has, and how it relates to the presentation we saw earlier. But firstly, why is creativity becoming so important? A few months ago, I was visiting one of the schools that we operate in. And after I'd seen some work that they'd been doing, somebody said, there's a 16-year-old boy here who would like to ask you some questions because he's making a short film about creative partnerships. Would you mind? And I said no, and I was taken into the head teacher's office, and the boy was there, and he had a video camera, and he asked me some questions, and I answered them, and I went away, and I thought nothing more about it. But about 4 weeks later, I got a DVD in the post, and this is what was on the DVD.
My name is Paul Collar. I'm National Director of Creative Partnerships. At its heart, Creative Partnerships is about making education a better experience for young people and making sure that they leave school with a set of skills that are going to set them up properly to be a success in the 21st century. Ultimately, if Creative Partnerships is going to have a long-term impact, then it is going to be an impact on teachers, because we can't forever be in schools doing that. What we have to do is to be able to work with teachers and bring around changes in what they do. If you get the right creative process going, and you step on the outside and you're watching people, then people are at their most alive when they're doing that. They're completely focused, engaged in this different place. And it's that look, absolute rapt fascination that you get across people's faces that makes it all worthwhile. And you think, that's absolutely living, actually.
The significant thing about that story is a few weeks later I was having a meeting with the directors of some of our big advertising agencies in England. And advertising is a really important part of our economy. It creates thousands of jobs, they're very well paid jobs, and they're lots of fun to do. So lots of people want to do those jobs. But the social profile of the people who get those jobs are very much from the top end of society. And our discussion was about how we could make changes to who gets jobs in advertising. And the directors of the advertising agencies were very unsympathetic. They said, it's difficult, it's not for us to do social engineering. Every time we advertise a job, even if it's just for a receptionist, we get 1,000 applications. You need a master's degree even to get an interview to be a receptionist. A lot of young people actually work for free in advertising for up to 2 years, so they build a resume in which they have experience in advertising. If you come from a poor background, there's just no chance. And I said, okay, but at the end I said, I've got a video I'd like to show you. And I showed them that video. And they all wanted the telephone number of that boy because they were going to ring him up that afternoon and offer him a job, because they could see that by the end of the week, he would be in a meeting with clients, pitching ideas for adverts that clients wanted to buy. And the skill in that piece of animation isn't the technical skill, which obviously is enormous in making the clay work like that. It is the caricature of me, which is very subtle indeed. But what he demonstrates in doing that is that he has invented something. What was interesting to me is the directors of those advertising agencies didn't know they needed him until they saw it. And the moment they saw it, they thought, that's what I'm looking for. And this is a fundamentally different sense of what the future labour market is going to look for. Our government has a statistic. I don't know how they come up with these statistics, but they say 60% of the jobs kids in school today will do have not yet been invented. And largely speaking, you know that's true. And I lecture a lot in schools, talking to young people, and I say, and what's good and tough about it is you're going to have to invent those jobs. Because what the world is looking for now is not job seekers, but job creators. And this is a fundamental shift in the process. If you have the skills to invent your own future, which is what inventing jobs is about, the world is the most exciting place to grow up as a young person in. Never before has this opportunity for you to come up and dream a future and then make it happen. But if you don't have the skills to do it, then you're finished. Because you come out of the education system with a whole set of qualifications that you were persuaded was going to result in a job waiting out there. And you come out only to find that those jobs simply aren't waiting for you. And this is a very big shift, and I think it's the big challenge for education, is how do you develop the skills in young people to do that? Now, Klaus said it's not the job of education to prepare people for the employment market, because the employment market has many failures. It's about what should happen in school is actually preparing young people for the life of work. So he talks about qualification, that's the development of some knowledge and skills. It's about learning how to manipulate knowledge and develop technical skills. Of course, that's something that needs to continue. We shouldn't throw that out. It needs creativity, but creativity is actually driven by a set of characteristics which relate very directly to what he was talking about. Agency is an absolutely key word. One thing you have to teach young people before they leave school is they have the power to make a difference in their own lives. And the children who most fail after school are the ones who never learned that. They don't know it's down to them. They've given up. Collaboration, the complex social interaction skills that are so important to develop, are fundamental to working in the modern workplace. It's all about teamwork. It's about working together. And finally, the resilience, which is the regeneration that Klaus talks about, is absolutely right. The creative processes through which you go and have ideas and then implement them require resilience. If you meet very successful entrepreneurs with big businesses, the thing you find about them isn't that they were great at having ideas, is that they had lots of ideas, tried all of them, 99% were a disaster, but they ended up with one which worked. And therefore, it's not just about ideas, it's about being able to implement them, which is key, but it's being able to come back when they don't work. And that's an absolute key skill. So I think these skills that Klaus talks about are fundamental to any education system. But it so happens that they now match the labour market. 100 years ago, they didn't. You didn't need those kind of things because you were going to go in a factory and be told what to do, or go down a mine and be told what to do. The world has changed and has caught up with the vision for education that I think many people have had for many years, but it's now time for it. So, what is going on in school today? I mentioned that we were working with the OECD, and you all know that the OECD runs PISA. And PISA is a test of young people at the age of 15 and 16 in science, maths, and literacy. What most people don't know is that PISA also tests the same young people for interest in the subject and how confident they feel in the subject. They call it self-concept. And the reason that they actually measure confidence and self-concept is because what determines whether you go on to pursue a career is actually your confidence and your interest in the subject. It's not your test score. Classic example of this was Einstein. We all know he wasn't a great academic. He got a third-class degree. He couldn't get a job in university. He had to get a job as a clerk. But whilst he had the job for the clerk, he wrote the theory of relativity because he was so interested and he was so confident that he knew what he was talking about. So having measured these things, PISA then produces graphs which mostly the politicians completely ignore, which correlate interest, test scores and confidence in test scores. And they look like this. So we all know Finland always comes out with the top test score, but Finnish children are the least interested in science and none of them are planning to go and have a career in science. And you can see that as the test scores go up, there's a very distinct correlation up the opposite way. When you look at the self-concept, we know that the Japanese and the Koreans do very well in the tests, but they come out believing they are no good at the subject. And it is absolutely underpinned by the pedagogy which is practiced. It is a very transmissive pedagogy. The teacher knows everything and will give you the facts. You watch the teacher and the facts will come to you. It's a very guided pedagogy, so the teacher is constantly navigating you towards the right answer. And what happens is you pass your test, but as soon as you take the teacher out of the mix, disaster. So in Korea and Japan, it is a huge crisis because they're desperate for more scientists. Children get the best scores at this age, but when they go to university, they fall apart. Because at university, the educational paradigm shifts. Suddenly you're on your own, there's nobody out there teaching you, you've got to work it out for yourself, and they can't cope. Because all they were taught was to pass tests. And the kind of characteristics that we heard about in the earlier presentation is what you need to develop in young people if they are going to become the independent, autonomous learners that is necessary not only in university, but in employment beyond that. We've used this quadrant here to kind of explain what it is that we try and achieve in schools. What kind of change are we bringing around? And we have here a matrix that goes from low system to high system, and from here goes from low empathy to high empathy. And what you get down here is low-performing schools. And schools which are really struggling tend to be low-system schools. There isn't a good structure, the curriculum keeps changing, there isn't a sense communicated to children about what progression means, the teachers aren't sure about it, but they're also low-empathy environments. They're not child-centred, relations between pupils and staff are not good. Education systems, or education authorities, when they come in to work on this, what they try and do is move these schools up into that space. And that space is the low empathy, high system environment in which what happens is that lots of systems are brought in, lots of testing, lots of measuring, lots of very clear curriculum, everything's narrowed down, so teacher can turn up on the first day and here's your lesson plan for every class for the whole of the year. But they remain very low empathy environments. Children get better at passing tests, so the education authorities think that's good, but they actually get no better in coping with the kind of qualities that Klaus talks about. They're not resilient because they're completely dependent on teachers to achieve that. Why should they be resilient? They don't need it. They're not participative. It's not a participative process. No social skills are being developed in this environment at all. Now, what you have normally with cultural and artistic activities, and quite a lot of sporting activities, is they end up down here in the sense that they're high empathy but low system. And by that I mean the young people doing them feel very good, but it doesn't contribute towards their personal development and their learning. And those were Klaus's slides that I was really interested in when he was talking about how young people from low academic backgrounds will tend to take up activities in this area. And our argument is that's such a shame, because you can use those activities by moving them up there. If you connect them with their learning and their personal development, then you can get them to a stage where their learning begins to develop. What we found with the Creative Partnerships programme, one of the challenges we have in dealing with schools, is a lot of schools are very committed to being up here. They like it up there, the test results are okay, everybody's behaving more or less all right, and so forth. But on Friday afternoons, you can have some fun. And then it's sport, or it's culture, or it's something else down there. And that, to us, is the biggest challenge, because we go, no, we want these to come together up in that top quadrant, because then you develop the kind of qualities that Klaus talks about, you still get great test scores. What does it look like in the classroom? We're still working on this, and there's sort of bits I'm not sure about. And this is going to contribute to a publication that we're going to do probably next year. But you've got low empathy on the side, which is the transmitted, guided form of education. And facilitative on the left. And one of the reasons I say I'm working on this is facilitative sounds too soft. I actually think teachers need to be really challenging by setting difficult things for pupils to do. And therefore that's within high empathy as well. The activities are better when they're authentic, so you're doing something that you feel is real rather than artificial. And particularly as children get into the teenage years, they begin to feel that school loses touch with reality. You're doing a whole saying, what does this mean? How's this ever going to fit into anything in my life? The organisation of time tends to go from bell-bound on the right down to extended. It's very clear from a lot of the research that we've done that this is a key component. But I was talking to the director of the Education Development Centre in Riga in Latvia the other day, and I hadn't shown her any of this, but she'd just done a lot of teacher observation because they're responsible for in-career teacher training. And she said, you know, the one marker you can always tell of a good teacher is that with a bad teacher, when the bell rings, the kids are out the door. With a good teacher, when the bell rings, the kids don't move. Because they're focused on the task, and then they go, oh, it's that time to finish. And that's absolutely key. The organisation of space, what your classroom looks like, the approach to task, whether it's very individual, which is very low empathy, or working in groups, where you can achieve all the same academic results, but you're also exercising and developing the social skills, and the visibility of processes. In low empathy environments, you're writing in your notebook. Maybe the teacher will see some of it. but they're very low-risk environments. In high empathy environments, you're working collaboratively to create something which you're going to have to present back to everybody. And that's high risk, but it's high visibility. And what the children say in all our research is that they like high risk because when you pull it off, you feel so good. And it's beginning to build those inner skills which are so important. And ultimately, what you want to do is to move from directed children to self-managing children and young people. And I think those are what the skills are that you have to develop in school. What impact does Creative Partnerships approach have? We've been obsessed with research over the 10 years, and we've done a vast amount of it. And we're putting up a lot more research in the next few weeks, because we've been doing lots of very, very detailed classroom observation, looking at different pedagogical styles. And in fact, one of the reports that will go up is called signature pedagogies, which is, are there signature pedagogies? Can you define them and describe them that actually elicit these responses? But we've done a lot more of the quantitative sort of research as well, which politicians like. We've been able, because of the scale of the programme, we've been able to do very large numbers. So we've been studying 13,000 young people who've been through our programmes and comparing them with 87,000 young people who have not, but are from exactly the same backgrounds, same kind of schools, same academic starting points. And we're able to show, because we focus on young people from economically and socially challenged communities, young people who participate in activities outperform the national average at Key Stage 3, which is the exams we take at 12, and Key Stage 4, which is the exams we take at 16. These children were predicted to significantly underperform the national average. Ofsted is the National School Inspection Service. As well as inspecting schools, it inspects programmes. And they have inspected us twice, and in 2010 they said there is not a conflict between the national curriculum, national standards, and creative approaches to learning. In fact, when the ones that they looked at, there was better than average achievement or a marked upward trend. Schools in challenging circumstances showed the greatest improvements. Improvements in literacy, particularly writing, is significant. Speaking was significant. Creative Partnerships has demonstrated even the most reluctant pupils can be engaged and excited. Ofsted, the School Inspection Service, is the most conservative, boring institution you have ever come across. They are not given to be enthusiastic about anything, but they are enthusiastic about this and really feel that this makes fundamental differences. We've also done big research onto the impact of this work on parents, which shows there is a big impact, and there's a lot of interesting stuff on there. And we've also done a very big statistical analysis which shows programs in schools in our programs have significantly better attendance rates. In fact, they're educationally significant in statistical terms, which is very, very rare to find. So, how does all this work? What I want to do in this section is just give you a flavour of a few examples of projects that we've done, which I think contribute to having this effect. So, turning schools into 21st century learning environments, UNESCO has these, as you all know, have these 4 pillars of education, which I like. Learning to know, learning to do, learning to be, and learning to live together. And most education systems are very focused on learning to know and learning to do. And I think this is the qualification part of what Klaus talked about. And that, of course, schools are going to have to continue to do that. But the question is, how can you do it in a way which is much more creative? Now, one of the solutions is using more ICT. Those of you who've managed to get into Stephen Happel's workshop this afternoon are very lucky, because he's an extraordinary man. But in particular, I think he's demonstrated that ICT can be used for better approaches to learning and in creative and innovative ways. My experience, though, is most IT is used to replicate very uninnovative teaching practices, and just because it's on a screen doesn't mean it's innovative and new. But anyway, in this project, I'm going to show you a video. It's about a maths project that we did in a school. It was a secondary school, and we were dealing with 11, 12-year-olds, which are just coming into secondary school, and we were dealing with a group of children who were very low performing. Yeah.
My name is Fiona Johnson, and I'm an animator, and I've been working with pupils at Harrogfold to engage them more in maths. So my part was to take over after the drama artists had actually worked with the children to look at different scenarios where math could actually take place. Then my job to take over that was to animate what they'd learned. So we sort of created some dramas, and the animation part came in was to have some animation mixed in with the live action. So we took their graphs and their objects that they were animating. So for an example, one group were the Russian mafia, and their math problem was to drink as many shots of vodka as they could within a certain period of time. So they could measure the distance and speed of the vodka shot going from the table to the mouth and how many they could consume in that time. So they would had a bar, set the bar up and actually did that as a drama. Then the graph was actually animated with little vodka glasses to actually show how fast they could drink those vodka shots and how many. So it was looking at distance and speed. So it was just a creative way of getting them to be able to recall math problems. And because they, through drama and video and animation, they have to repeat that process over and over again, it becomes much better for them to actually recall and solve those problems. So all in all, after a sticky start...
Sorry.
We might have to just start that
and a few frustrations. They were absolutely great. So they've now produced 4 short films that look at distance and speed and working with graphs.
Having experienced the processes of creating an animation, we decided to produce one in-house in order to illustrate more of the key concepts of the maths curriculum. As an arts college, we're fortunate to have the facilities to be able to do this, as can be seen from the following example.
Welcome to Maths News. Today's story is very exciting. There is a crisis in the farming industry. Due to the lack of space in the countryside, farmers are having to relocate hen coops. We now hand over to our exceptional reporter, Alex, who is on the roof.
Thank you, Jasmine. We have been speaking to local eggs to find out exactly what has been happening.
It's cracking me.
I'm shell-shocked. It's awful, just awful.
Terrible, terrible, terrible.
We spoke to one of the relocated hens.
It is awful. 30 of my eggs have been scrambled on the pavement. I'd like to know what speed they fell at when they left that roof.
I spoke to an expert who had been working on the equation.
I used the equation, distance divided by time equals speed. These were my findings.
The results show that the speed of the first egg drop was 9.8 meters per second. The second egg drop was 9.7 meters per second, and the third egg drop was 9.9 meters per second, giving an average of 9.8. In conclusion, the results show that the eggs should stay in the country. This is Alex reporting for Maths News.
Today we did like a thing where one person was a teacher, like a perfect teacher, one was a perfect student, one was the lesson, and one was a perfect parent. And like we had to say examples like what a perfect parent or something would be, and then we wrote it down and like stuck it on his like with post-it notes and that.
We decided as a group what makes a good maths lesson is that the teacher was good and did fun things, and the work wasn't too hard, and the classroom was colourful and posters to help us with our maths. We've got a good maths teacher because he helps us with our work and gives us the right work for us, and it's fun and it makes us laugh.
This cohort of students have exceeded expectations, and in test results at the end of the project have achieved more highly than a top set Year 9 who were taught in a conventional maths setting. The Creative Partnership Initiative has reinforced the positive impact that using creative practices can have in maths, and we're looking forward now to developing this across other curriculum areas.
Now, I let that go on so you had quite a sense of the whole sort of trajectory of that project. One of the things in all our projects that we do is at the end of the project we get the children or the pupils to reflect on what they learnt about learning. And to me, this is a fundamental process you need to constantly reinforce with the children. So much the class ends with, what did you learn today? But really you need to get to, what did you learn about learning? And that section when they're reflecting on the impact of the classroom or their parents or their teacher's personality on their learning were all part of what made them successful. But the killer point about that is the one that the head teacher says right at the end of the video, is we were asked to go in and work with them because they were low-performing maths students in a school which grouped students according to ability. And at the end of the program, they achieved higher maths results than the top set in that school. And it just blew the school away. Because they just wanted to get them up to average, if you see what I mean. That this different approach gets the knowledge and skills sorted. The schools that work for everyone, using many languages, and I think this is part of the social attachment process. There are many languages in our lives, and actually to develop sophisticated relationships we use a lot of different ones. But in school there tends to be a very clear focus on using the spoken word as the predominant language and ignoring the other ones. And this is an example of a project we were doing in the northeast of England, and it was in a school for severely autistic children. And the artist who came in and worked with them did a lot of work with this boy who was called Parisi. Parisi was severely autistic. He didn't communicate at all. He was dropped off by his parents. He lived in a little world of his own. And didn't communicate with the teachers. Claire came in and started working with him. And one of the things that she did first was to create a space in the classroom which was surrounded by white sheets. It just blanked everything out. And one of the things that happened is that Parisi suddenly started to come alive in this space. And one of the things that they learned is that he had a huge problem dealing with visual noise, and that was why he cowered into himself. And when that was taken away, he was willing to come out and explore. So Claire started to bring in lots of different things into this space in order to explore with him. One day came in with a suitcase which had nothing in it, lots of hats and sunglasses. And Parisi was really interested in this. And then for a long period of time started putting hats and sunglasses on Claire, looking at them, and then changing the sunglasses and changing the hat and doing it in different ways. Until he'd come up with a combination of hat and sunglass, which was right for Claire, and then he did the same for him. And then when he was finished, he asked Claire to take a photograph, and this was the photograph. Now, to the teachers, what was absolutely fascinating is that they thought that Parisi couldn't communicate because he couldn't make meaning and he couldn't make language. That was his problem. But what they learned is he had a very acute capacity to make meaning and make language. It just wasn't a language anyone else spoke, i.e. sunglasses and hats language. But although this is a very extreme example, I think a lot of the same thing happens in the classroom, that we focus on a particular language and we don't allow children to develop a whole range of languages as to how they communicate. And I think the sort of practices that we've championed there have allowed children to identify other languages in which to do. the attitude towards language is also key from another project that we were doing in Austria, in fact, where we brought in an artist who's a photographer from Kyrgyzstan and didn't speak any German. And the migrant children who were in that school were fascinated by this very successful adult who didn't speak German, because it seemed to them that that was not right. When we visited the school afterwards to talk to the teachers about the impact of it, she said that the biggest impact was this language thing with the photographer, because the migrant children came to realise that not speaking German was a disadvantage, not a disability. And it changed their attitude towards learning German, and they become much more engaged. And I think that this question of how you stigmatise children's performance in language and how it interrupts their ability to develop academically as well as socially is a significant problem. Developing teachers' competencies. I mean, a lot of Klaus's concepts are very big and deep, and I don't want to suggest that I'm summarising them, because I'm only dealing with aspects of them. But one of the aspects is regeneration and resilience, and there was a lot of talk this morning about the question of boys in particular. I have 3 boys and a girl as children, so I'm very aware of this. And this, to me, fits into the UNESCO category of learning to be, learning your identity and so forth. One of the problems, I think, with schools is that we pretend that they are emotion-free zones. If children are emotional in school, you say, oh, that's not appropriate behaviour. I was in a school the other day talking to a 9-year-old boy, and I said, is it important that teachers do creative things? And the boy said, oh, it's really important. And I said, well, why is it so important? He said, well, when my teacher's teaching the normal stuff, she's got her grumpy face on. And then if I don't understand, I don't want to ask. But when she's doing something creative, she's got her happy face on. And then if I don't understand, I ask, and she doesn't mind telling me. Now, this meeting was going on with quite a lot of teachers and the school director and so forth, I think, and you could hear the adults go, because the boy was taking the mask off about what was happening. He was saying, I moderate my learning behaviour according to my reading of my teacher's emotion. And that's a very scary thought, particularly if nobody ever mentions that his teacher has bad moods. But what this relates to me with boys is that boys come into school, they are not as good at learning to deal with emotion. But actually, schools destroy whatever capacity they have. The empathy they arrived with is gradually taken out, because they go, but I can see she's always in a bad mood and nobody ever mentions it. Therefore, it's probably something wrong with me. Therefore, it builds a distrust of emotion and so forth. And boys seem to me to be much more susceptible to that. And if these emotions, therefore, find no place in school, then they build up inside, and gradually the learning capacities of that child begin to fall off. I'll give you another example here. So this is a photograph of a project, again, that we did in Austria. And the artist here has a practice where he comes in with big posters and magazines and takes, the children can cut out photographs and put on masks. And then they have to create a monologue for the character they've invented and perform it. And then they have to write the monologue, because it's a literacy project and the kids weren't warned. But they're happy by the time they get to that. Now, in this particular class, there was a 9-year-old boy whose parents were getting divorced. And it was one of those very, very messy divorces where one of the parents had moved out, which meant the other parent couldn't afford the apartment anymore, so she'd had to move to another part of town, which meant that he'd had to come out to school, go to a different school, so he'd lost all his friends, and he'd lost his dad, and life was a complete and utter disaster. And it was his turn to create a character. And this is actually him. And he created this mask. And when he came to tell the story, this was his story. He said, I'm a man, and last night I went to the bar and I got very drunk. And on the way home, by accident, I ran over my parents and I killed them. But nobody saw me, so I put the bodies in the back of the car and I drove it home, and I buried them in the garden. And now everybody's very worried because my parents are missing, but they're being very nice to me because they think I must be upset. But they don't realise that actually I killed them. Now, when you're dealing with 9-year-old boys, or 9-year-old children generally, their concept of family is them. These adults came together and had a family. What's the family? It's me. There isn't a broader concept there. And therefore, if these adults don't want to be parents anymore, they don't want to be a family, it must be me. It must be my fault. So inside him, all this is going on about how he's destroyed, he's killed his parents. That's what he's thinking. What this practice allows him to do is to put it out there as a metaphor. Not to get up in class and go, I think I killed my parents, but to create a space into which he can then say, this is how I'm feeling, in a way that other people can recognise it and start to deal with it. And I think a lot of what was said earlier about we've got to find spaces for boys to engage with the education, I think we've got to find these kinds of spaces with all that tumult that is going on inside them is allowed to be put out there, and then we begin to deal with them. So it's creating the space to know where they are before we're ever going to start to deal with them is an absolutely vital part of what we do. And finally, the internationalisation and about learning to live together and participation and social and democratic values. These things all come together very, very strongly. I'm going to show you the opening of a film made by some 12, 13-year-old children from Malmö in Sweden. The film was made as part of a project that we were doing. The children are all from migrant backgrounds, and they live in the most deprived community in the whole of Sweden. And this is the opening of their film.
Förra veckan så pratade vi om känslor i klassen, och då kom vi in på en känsla som är rädsla. Och då fick vi rita en bild.
Och den här bilden, vad säger den då? Och det står någonting på baksidan. Viskningar från underjorden.
Vad är de här flickorna rädda för, Hanna? Det är du som har ritat den bilden.
Ja.
Vad är det du har ritat?
Det är några flickor som är ute och har massa röster.
Klockan är jättemycket, så vi får gå ut på rast nu allihop.
Det är sant. Eller? Ska jag säga? Vadå? Ska jag säga vad hon sa? Hon har snackat skit om en tjej. Ja.
Har du snackat skit om mig? Jo, det har.
Vad sätter? Du vill han sätta ett bra. Om jag hade spelat med rösta. Nej, sätta inte rösta.
there are two really important things about that. Firstly, the opening scene in the classroom. You must remember, this is a film that was written, conceived and performed by young people. They had professional filmmakers helping them with it. And therefore, the scene in the classroom is a performance. But it's an absolutely brilliant performance of a really bad Friday afternoon arts class in which nobody's paying attention, which is low empathy, which isn't connected with their learning and development. And not only is it important to connect it, they know when it's not connected, and they can play it back to you. And I actually met these children 2 weeks ago because I was in Malmo for another reason, and I'd never actually met them. And I said to them, how did you perform? How did you perform behaving so badly so well? And they said, that's the one thing we know. The second thing about it is that this film was a film which explored the idea of fear. And it explored it over a year, and during the autumn term they did lots of workshops around fear and drew drawings and wrote poems and all that kind of thing. But during that autumn, there was a gunman loose in Malmo who was a right-wing extremist and who was shooting migrants dead in the street. So if you were a migrant, or from migrant background in that city, the thing you were most terrified about was the gunman. And it would have been perfectly acceptable for them to create a film which was about a diabolical gunman who was shooting people and he was all bad and they were all good and they were the innocent victims. But in the whole film there is no mention of the gunman other than in the title, which is targets. And the word target is used in the film to describe bullies, people who are bullied, but it's about bullying. And what the children did in making this film is work out that the gunman was a bully, but actually bullying is in all of us. And unless we recognise it and deal with it from the inside, we're never going to deal with it from the outside. There's a very famous German film called Confessions of Winifred Wagner, which is a long interview with Winifred Wagner, who was the granddaughter of Wagner and a close friend of Hitler. And the whole film, she just talks about Hitler coming round in the evening and going upstairs and reading stories to the kids and coming down and playing the piano and singing German folk songs and all that kind of thing. And the film was making the same point. We all think we're going to recognise people like Hitler when they come again because they'll have little black moustaches and it'll be easy. But actually, it's the guy next door, and you have to understand that. Now, this comes back to the fundamental issues which you asked about and you were referring to about social and democratic engagement. The children, given the space to explore a really difficult moral issue, came to an extraordinarily mature conclusion. And the reason they so often find it difficult to is they're never given that space in school or anywhere in their communities to do it. They are told what values are. They are told what they need to believe in. They are not given the opportunity to explore those things from the inside out. And that is the fundamental thing that has to take place if you're really going to develop the kind of skills that Klaus talked so articulately about and end up with an education system which is really fit for the 21st century and develops the young people we want. That's the summary of the connections, but I've been through all those points, so I don't think I need to make them again. Thank you very much indeed.
We would normally go into a quick question and answer session, but we're running a bit behind time, and Paul has confirmed that he will be here throughout today and also tomorrow. So I would please encourage you to seek him out. I also noticed that lots of people were taking photos of some of the slides. Paul, is it possible for us to have copies of some of your diagrams, and maybe Comenius at the back, somebody could make sure that those are then distributed? But I have a few announcements to make before lunch, but I think I certainly would like to give Paul a big hand of appreciation for really stimulating us with some hard questions. Thank you. I would now quickly like to invite my three colleagues to come on the stage. We all work for a company called Prospects, which is based here in Belgium. And one of our specialities is engaging stakeholders, such as yourselves, in complex policy development issues. Now, Paul has been talking a lot about participatory development and engaging You're going to be doing a lot of that this afternoon. And to guide you through that process, myself and my 3 colleagues, and we'll just very quickly introduce ourselves and our workshops, and then we'll take it from there. But here's a mic.
Thank you. Hello everyone, my name is Diana Medill, and I will be doing workshop number 1 this afternoon, which is about ICT. And our meeting room is this room at the back, and it's called Workshop A. And the people who are involved in my workshop, the 2 people from the, how can I say it,
Project partners?
Project partners, and also the speaker at the very beginning. I'll have a quick meeting with you just after this at that end of the room. So workshop 1 in here at 2 o'clock.
Thank you. My name is Steven Lieberich. I will be facilitating workshop number 2. And we will work on developing teacher competences. And yes, also for me, speakers, partners of workshop 2 are invited to contact me after or during lunchtime so that we could just talk through the program. And our workshop will take place in one of the meeting rooms, which is a bit that direction, right? So I think it's room number D, label D, but there is an indication. You will find it.
Hello, my name is Peter van der Viegelen. I will facilitate workshop 3, which is about inclusive schools, schools that work for everyone. That workshop will take place also next door, through that door over there, in room CD, and we will guide you there. Same for me, if the expert speaker and the partners could also join me just within a few minutes so that we can go through the program, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
And finally, again, my name is Martin Watson. I will be doing workshop 4, supporting the internationalization of schools. And we will be in room B, which is here. There'll be a dividing wall, they will be there, they'll be here. If also my 2 project partners and policy experts could meet me here before going to lunch, that would be great. Finally, can I all ask you to pick up your badges? You've got them clipped on somewhere. Pick them up, turn them round and have a look. You will have a colour on your badge. Anybody who has a dark green dot, you are in my workshop.
If you have a dark blue dot on the name tag, that's workshop 3.
The dots are not, by the way, the dots are not at the back side, it's the front side, right? And the red dotted people will be my people. Looking forward to meeting you.
And mine is purple, purple for workshop 1 in room A. Thank you.
Lunch is downstairs. Please be in your workshops by 2 o'clock. If you don't have a dot on your badge, please go straight back to team.